Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, esteemed panelists, moderators, and attendees. I am Onyinye Ukebu. I manage the legal business, which is the legal segment of BusinessDay, West Africa's premier business publication. Thank you all for joining us for today's digital conversation, which is one of the several we've had in partnership with the Nigerian Bar Association, Section on Business Law, Employment, Labor, and Industrial Relations Committee. Thank you, Mr. Opeko, Chairman of the ELIR Committee, for your efforts towards the success of these conversations. Today's conversation, focusing on the required skills for today's leaders and employees, promises to be highly informative with the lineup of top-notch panelists who have afforded us their time and perspectives. On today's program, Mr. Ayuli Jemide, Chairman of the Section on Business Law and lead partner, Detail Commercial Solicitors, will give the opening remarks. Thereafter, the conversation will be in two segments. The first segment from the CEO's perspectives and the second segment from the employees. Without further ado, I invite Mr. Ayuli Jemide, Chairman, NBA SPL, and lead partner, Detail Commercial Solicitors, for his opening remarks. Mr. Jemide.
Thank you. Thank you, Iye. And thanks to everyone for attending. And thanks to Ose and the team for putting this together, and the panelists for making time out to attend. I know we have two perspectives here this afternoon, but permit me just to talk from the CEO's perspective, because I'm a CEO. And I think that the CEOs are very important for steering the ship, and I would allow other people to talk from other perspectives. As a CEO myself, I would say a few things to set the tone. And the first thing I will say is that CEOs are always the first to go gray and go bald. And if you look around, you will probably know who the CEOs are. The other thing I would say is that CEOs are often very misunderstood, particularly when they see things that other people just don't see for whatever reason. And honestly, the only way to really understand a CEO is to be one for 1 week. Be a CEO for 7 days. Just sit on that chair and try and deal with the things that CEOs deal with. I had a staff, a lawyer who left after working with us for over 7 years, went and set up on her own. Within 2 weeks, I got an email praising me and saying, "You are such a nice man. Now I know how nice you are when I have to deal with all the things that are on my plate." And you know, I found that very instructive, and it reminded me of the saying that, you know, you never really judge a person until you've worn their shoes and walked for 1 mile. So, last thing I would say about CEOs is that CEOs are people whose names you know, but you seldom know their stories. CEOs are people, you know what they have done, but you seldom know what they have been through. And I'm hoping that with this discussion, we will have better understanding of CEOs, both from what the CEOs say and from what the employees say. And that at the end of this discussion, you will probably know more stories, know more of their stories, and know more of what they have been through. On that note, I thank you all for listening, and I'm all ears waiting to go. Thank you, Iye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jemide, for that CEO perspective. And thank you so much for setting the tone for the conversation that is to come. So I will go ahead and introduce our panelists. and our moderator, and hand over to our moderator. Okay, so first I would introduce Mrs. Adeolu Adewumiza, MD CEO Alliance Nigeria Insurance PLC. Adeolu Adewumiza is the MD CEO for Alliance Nigeria Insurance PLC, a position she assumed in September 2020. She's a global strategist and transformation leader who has held a number of key executive positions within the Alliance Group, based in 3 different countries. Prior to serving in her current role, Adeolu was the regional head of Mergers, Acquisitions, and Transformation Africa for the Alliance Group, and was appointed the first female board member for Alliance Nigeria in 2019. She has worked since 2000 in global financial services across numerous mature and emerging markets, beginning her career in the USA as an actuarial and international benefits consultant with the Aon Group. In addition to her responsibilities at Alliance Nigeria, Adeolu is married with 2 children, and in her spare time, she is a lifelong runner, a voracious reader, and loves discovering new countries and cultures. Welcome, Mrs. Adewumiza. Next on the panel, we have, you're very welcome. Next on the panel, we have Ms. Adesimbo Ukiri, who is the MD CEO, Avon Healthcare Limited. Adesimbo Ukiri is the pioneer managing director, and CEO of Avon Healthcare Limited, spearheading its evolution from a startup in 2012 into the leading Nigerian health management organization it is today. She's a passionate healthcare advocate, having spoken internationally on topics including moving the needle on healthcare financing, the future market for health coverage, and accelerating the journey to universal health coverage. She features as a contributing resource and a choice speaker for global organizations such as the International Finance Corporation, World Health Organization, and the Corporate Council in Africa, as well as other similar institutions seeking expert healthcare perspectives in sub-Saharan Africa. Before starting Avon HMO in 2012, Adesimbo's leadership experience cuts across critical disciplines of business management, including marketing, sales, legal, finance, and operations for multinationals and national corporates. She has over 20 years of professional experience within a number of sectors, including financial services, FMCG, telecommunications, and healthcare. You're very welcome, Ms. Ukiri.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And then we have the Leonard Silk with us, Mr. Anthony Idigbe, SAN, who it is my honor to introduce. Chief Anthony Idigbe is a seasoned legal practitioner with over 35 years experience. He was elevated to the rank of SAN in 2000 and has distinguished himself in the areas of advocacy, insolvency, arbitration, dispute resolution, consultancy and process advisory services, privatization, capital markets, mergers and acquisitions, aviation, telecoms, amongst others. Chief Idigbe has worked closely with corporate bodies, governmental agencies, and high net worth individuals on both contentious and non-contentious matters. He is a fellow of the International Bar Association, Insolvency International, and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators UK. He has 3 Masters of Law degrees and an MBA from prestigious universities around the world. He's a notary public, renowned speaker, and the author of several publications. You're very welcome, Chief Idigbe. Finally, I will introduce our moderator for today's event and hand over for the panel to begin.
Thank you.
Mr. Falabi Kuti graduated with an LLB from Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, and subsequently an LLM from the University of Lagos. Since joining Pechton and Grace LP, he has demonstrated his skills in corporate commercial litigation, insolvency and secured credit transactions, alternative dispute resolution, and labor and employment matters. He is the supervising partner of the firm's employment law, company law, and litigation desks. He is a prolific writer and is widely published on a vast range of subjects, such as commercial litigation, civil procedure, and literary criticism. He was selected to join a panel of facilitators drawn from 7 countries across the globe at a session organized by the E&I International Resources Legal Team on non-discrimination legislation. He's a regular speaker and facilitator and resource person at conferences and seminars, particularly those dealing with the evolving world of work and related legal issues. Thank you all so much for being here. You're very welcome, Mr. Kuti. I will hand over to you now for the insightful conversations that I expect from this panel. Thank you.
And I thank you, Onye, for handing over to me to moderate through what appears to be a very difficult session in terms of the small timeline that we have between now and 4 o'clock to listen to this rich array of speakers address the various issues around what COVID-19 has imposed on not least the world of work, on life generally, the corporate sector in particular. Now, it's no longer news that with the global public health crisis that COVID-19 brought about, which still remains unprecedented crisis, in 2020, coming into 2021, this has left permanent scars, permanent marks on quite a number of things. The pandemic has left permanent marks and disrupted many industries. The path to recovery from COVID in itself remains unclear. COVID-19 remains unclear. The general consensus today continues to be that what we face a protracted period with many restrictions still in place. And that even after the initial recovery phase, business will still not return back to normal. So what this conversation basically aims to look at is from the perspective of employers, from the perspective of CEOs, what are the business resilience management approaches that have been put in place, or they were put in place when COVID-19 happened, and still the little issues around a number of these things till date and how they have been managed. So that is really what we have set out to achieve with this small session, which I said again, between now and 4 o'clock, we would have to strictly manage through. I do not need to introduce the speaker. Apologies there. Okay, so sorry about that. Just a small interference technology. So I did not need to introduce the speakers again, except to perhaps call on the speakers, one after the other, to perhaps share with us a few thoughts. COVID-19, businesses, how have they managed through? Just general talk around this, and then we go on to the specific questions for each of the speakers. So without much ado, I would invite Chief Anthony Idigbe, SAN, to perhaps share a few thoughts around the disruptive forces of COVID-19 on the business climate.
Thank you so much, Walabi. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really very grateful for this opportunity. And I thank the chairman of the SBL, who is still a CEO. For myself, I regard myself as an ex-CEO, and that today I'm now more of a governance leader, sitting on several boards, spanning hospitality industry, insurance, healthcare, maintenance, and of course also a senior partner in a legal firm where I'm not CEO. Let me make that clear. Still playing just the governance leader role. So I have experience in very many sectors where I offer that leadership, and then saw the pandemic occur. Folabi has already spoken about the pandemic itself. But what the pandemic means really for business is uncertainty. And the Harvard Business School did a research and asked some business leaders, what long-term issues the crisis prompted them to think about. And the vast majority said what it got them to think about was business disruption and risk management. And that was about 70%. Other issues like digitalization of work, future of globalization, financial health of the business, emerging business opportunities, stakeholders' interests, succession of leadership, and other current issues ranged between 30 and 10%. So really, the main issue is the business disruption and the risk management issues that are thrown up by an event like the pandemic, which brings uncertainty into business. We also in the firm, and I'm talking now about the law practice, decided to, at the early part of the pandemic, we did a survey because we wanted to know how our clients were coping and what problems they had in terms of changing how they were doing business, maybe going to remote operation. And most of them spoke about lack of knowledge, lack of their traditional skill not being fitted, lack of training, IT and other infrastructure, etc. The nature of their business. Some of them said, "Oh, the nature of my business is such that I can't do it remotely," etc. So there were quite a number of. Some even said they had challenge with finance. So they threw up a lot of challenges, and what we did was based on the outcome of the survey, we realized that our clients needed training. So we engaged very early on massive webinars, training for our clients, helping them, connecting them to computer people, trying to get them to know what they needed to know in order to operate remotely, because we felt that if our clients could then work remotely, then they will continue to pay us, and also will be in a business. So in terms of the overview, just looking at my experience from the different companies, I say that different companies suffered different effects from a pandemic. So you'd have emergency companies, you have thriving companies. So for instance, you have e-commerce, electronic entertainment, businesses. The way it will affect them will be different from the way it will affect tailors, who may find it difficult making sales because people are not going out anymore. So the effect of the crisis varies across basically 4 different sets of companies. So your response would also depend on which sector you are in. So for instance, due to some of those restrictions, some businesses were shut down. So that is one category. You would have to look for how you would survive if you had that kind of business. Some businesses were declared to be actually essential commodities. And so if you were declared to be essential, then of course that may create opportunity, but it also depends on how you respond to that opportunity. Some businesses were supporting stay at home because people were not going out. So they have to stay at home. So what would those people do when they're at home? They use more computers, they use more internet, they do Netflix, etc. So those are the sort of businesses that supported people staying at home. So while some other businesses were trying to invent a solution for the problem, for the pandemic. So you look at the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical business, etc. That you could say creates opportunity. So there's no one size fits all in terms of looking at the pandemic and how a particular business response to it. But what I can say is that the pandemic was also a labor crisis, because we are talking about labor. We are talking about human beings here. Goy Ryder, who is the ILO Director General, in a press conference in Abuja on the 19th of March, 2020, made this statement that the COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health crisis, but is also a significant labor market and economic crisis. And we have come to see that happen. So what has been the impact on labor? The layoffs, short-time work, redundancy, termination or dismissals, requesting employees to work from home, unpaid leave, like in the hospitality business that I'm involved with, or where I provide governorship and leadership, we had to ask some workers to stay home because of the shutdown. We could not offer services to clients, and therefore we couldn't maintain the staff. So the other issues, remuneration review, in some businesses, the remuneration was reviewed upwards, to encourage them to work. In some, it was reviewed downwards because, there was no business. So the other issues about force majeure, whether force majeure was available to their contracts, whether there were contractual terms, and then whether the government intervened. In some countries, the government intervened to give some supplements to enable companies to keep employees without sacking them. In some other countries, they didn't. So there are different responses, as it were. Now, in all this, the CEO or the governance leader, as I'll call myself, has to provide leadership, both in the pandemic and also plan ahead for post-pandemic. I would just want to summarize what is expected of leadership, and we may have opportunity to discuss it later. One, you have to be the CEO. CEO has to be flexibility. Second is cohesiveness, how to keep the workforce together, how to keep the company together, right? The third one is well-being, how to look after the well-being of the staff, of the people, because of the mental pressure from working at home, from not missing the social interaction, etc. The fourth one is you have to rethink the business development and client relationship. You have to rethink, how do you continue the business? How do you develop the business? How do you maintain your relationship with your clients, given that you have to work in a different manner? And then the last is that you have to rethink, the workforce development. How do you continue to develop your workforce? How do you maintain your culture? How do you, motivate them, etc.? Falabi, I just want to end here because I have only 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
I got carried away. I was struggling not to actually at one point that the rich, incisive, in-depth analysis in the opening remarks of the very reason would return to them. But we thank I thank Elsa for that very rich opening remarks in relation to what are the issues that COVID-19 up within the business climate. I would now move on to, let me quickly mention that for our attendees, your questions would be attended to at the end of the session. So please kindly go into chat box and leave your questions and observations, and then we'll come at some point. Permit me at this point to invite Mr. Adeolu to also share our opening thoughts or remarks in light of the discussion that we have today. Please, Madam, you have the stage forward.
Thank you very much. So the previous remarks were very comprehensive about the state of the industry, the state of the market in Nigeria. I'll take it a bit more personal. So as Onyinye mentioned, I took up this role in September of 2020. So just last year, right in the thick of COVID and the global pandemic. So if anyone had told me a year ago, so March of last year, just as COVID was starting, that I would be leading an organization of 100 plus people, 1,000 plus agents, basically using my iPad and iPhone, I would have rolled my eyes and said, "You've got to be kidding me." But that's what's been happening. As virtual as I already was, sitting on the regional team with offices all over the continent, offices interacting with people all over the world, taking on a role like this, I would have at least assumed that I would get a chance to meet my management team in person, sit with my board personally, and hear from them directly what vision they have, perhaps for the company, get to know my colleagues on a more individual basis. But that wasn't able to happen because of the current situation. So here I am today, 8 months later, almost 8 months later, and I can count the number of times on one hand that I've actually met with each of my leadership team. I've actually interacted much more with the sales force than I've interacted with our own employees. And yet we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we're transforming our business for the new world order. I'm not the only one. So just like me, a number of CEOs have had to drastically change the way they work, the way they lead, the way they manage their businesses. And we've learned that it's no longer business as usual. We heard some of it from our previous speaker about flexibility, about communication, about transparency. And these are all much more critical than ever before. They're always important, and now they've become even critical and must-haves. We're really moving away from that sort of helicopter management style where it was quite easy to try to micromanage your team, whether that was to their benefit or not, and having to learn to trust that our teams and the people we've chosen are the right people for the job, that they have the right skills for the job, and that they're able to manage their outcomes and deliver as they should. Because we're all working remotely. We're all here on video screen in different parts of the country, perhaps different parts of the world. And this is the new state of being for a long time to come, and perhaps forever. So now we need to focus on results. It's no longer about FaceTime. It's really about what can you deliver? What have you executed? Meeting discrete timelines and being able to deliver on this. And what this takes from us as leaders is that we need to be able to lead from the back, if I can say it like that. So loosen the reins a bit. Again, coming back to trusting that we have the right team in place, and being able to put a vision in front of that team that motivates them to deliver the results that are expected. So what do you need? If I could summarize, we need to instill hope in our organizations, hope for the future, so that they can look past the troubles and the trials of today within a global pandemic and see light on the other side, see where we can come to. We need to increase collaboration, not just within the business, but with outside the business. Come together in our various sectors, come together as a market, come together as Nigeria to really push towards the new dawn. As leaders, we need to stay up to date. The times are changing. Change is coming so quickly. Change is always there, but now it's on a daily basis. And so if we want to lead our businesses, our organizations in this new world, we need to stay abreast of all these changes. And we need to be dynamic. So we talk about flexibility before, and dealing with these changes. We need to be able to adjust and be adaptable and think quickly on our feet. And at the end of the day, we really need to listen and stay close to the folks on the ground to continue to walk the factory floor, even as we are mostly virtual, take the opportunity to really get out physically amongst our teams as much as possible. So if I could close there in a nutshell, I would say that more than ever, we need to engage, we need to empower, and we need to enable our teams for this post-COVID world.
Well, I can't thank you enough for quite a number of insightful solutions that you offered or preferred, which I can assure you will return to in the course of this session. Where I agree with you, it's no longer about FaceTime. It's quite a number of what you can achieve. It's been said that COVID has happened and has now realized that maybe in-person physical work in itself was vastly exaggerated. Technology has happened to make us realize that a lot of things could get achieved virtually. We'll come back to you. Thank you very much. In the meantime, let me quickly call on Adesumo Ukiri, Ms. Adesumo Ukiri, MD CEO of Heaven Healthcare, to also share opening thoughts on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And gosh, both speakers that spoke ahead of me have really touched on what the key issues are. But I'm going to try and offer a perspective from another angle. And the crisis, when it hit, nobody expected it to hit as severely as it did. Neither did anyone expect it to last as long as it did. And funny enough, we are in the healthcare business. You hear from the way I've been introduced, even though, our business sometimes is referred to as health insurance, and people might want to group it under financial services. I'm always quick to remind them that no, we're not in financial services. We're in the business of healthcare. Yeah. You might think of it as a financial product that gives you access to healthcare services, but we care about your health. We don't care about your finances, really. So it affected people's health, and it affected our ability to support people in having access to the healthcare that we're used to getting. It also affected the health of our own staff. And I'm talking about mental wellness now and emotional wellness. And what it made us focus on, yes, business continuity was an issue because we do operate a 24-hour call center that our hospitals and all the other healthcare providers we work with normally have access to. And suddenly people couldn't leave their homes and go to the office and work from the call center anymore. But very quickly, we were able to decentralize that and have people work from their homes. But what I can say is that as a leader, this crisis called on us all to reach into much more humane levels within ourselves than we have had to before. Because we found ourselves calling on also reserves of giving in our staff that we didn't need to call on before, because there was no longer strict working hours of 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, seeing as we were all working online and seeing as we were in healthcare and all our clients and our members were panicking and calling us at every hour of the day. There was no limit to how many hours people were working, and days were merging into nights, and suddenly we were having brainstorming sessions and still having meetings, and we'd call meetings at 9 p.m. in the evening, and then we'd call meetings first thing in the morning. So we're asking much more of our people than we normally do. So of course we had to think of other ways to also support them. And the people who were working remotely at home, this is Nigeria after all. We had to support them because they were having to fuel their diesel, their generators with diesel. They were having to pay for data in larger, spending larger amounts on data than they normally would have had to, because they were working their phones, and some of them were needing to access our systems, everything that was based on the cloud. They were working with systems that they normally would have access to only when they were in the office. And all these services were provided as part of the office services. So it called on us as leaders to step back really and try and ensure that in as much as we were asking staff to give more of themselves, we were also giving the support that was necessary. Not just support in terms of emotional support and all of that, but also support in terms of actual hard cash financial support, so that we ensure that they're not out of pocket. Of course, risk management became an issue as well, because we had people working remotely. And like I said, there are all kinds of IT-related security issues that working remotely brings to bear. And if you hadn't taken it seriously as an organization before, suddenly you had to take it very seriously, because sometimes the internet that people were using were not sometimes, it wasn't the office internet anymore. What kind of firewalls being placed when they were working with their phone as the hotspot from the house? How was data being protected? If they were using systems other than the office issued systems, how were you protecting data? We're healthcare, data is confidential. There are very, very strict rules about what we do. So all of that were areas that needed additional investments during this period. Because we also work with hospitals, and you know that most of our hospitals are not very advanced in terms of investment in technology and digitalizing their operations. We have a lot of paper claims. We've tried to convert most of them to submit their claims electronically, but some have moved, some have not. So that's also another area where we had to, focus on and try and get hospitals to transform how they operate and how they engage with us. And not surprisingly as well, corporate clients started to reach out to us that could we please do sessions on mental wellness that staff members were struggling. So it just helped us to also work with our corporate clients and the leaders of those organizations to bring more focus to mental wellness and mental health. And we saw ourselves kind of almost like champions in the area of mental wellness, because suddenly we saw that business leaders and hard-nosed CEOs who normally just wanted to discuss, oh, healthcare costs too much, you want to cut the budget for health plans. We're now really, really listening to what it would take to have a healthier workforce. And not just healthier in terms of, fewer people have hypertension, people who are high risk have reduced, but they're also now listening to, mental health. And this is definitely a plus. So what we see is that the crisis, in a way, has helped to bring people to think more deeply about their health and about the health of their workforce when they're business leaders, and to begin to realize that investment in health is not a waste of money and it's not a luxury. It's something that, as a business leader, you need to be very strategic about and to take very, very seriously as you envision your future and as you make plans for the talent that you have. Looking after their health is a very, very deliberate part of planning a company's growth. Thank you. Did I do that in 5 minutes?
Well, again, just had the temptation to stop you. But I was actually enjoying that analysis, the ESG operational plans, company, for example, put in place, the pandemic. And a couple of things that if time passes, I would return, especially to some things you shared about our workplace and all that. I'll come back to you shortly. In the meantime, let's just quickly call on Digbe again. It's interesting, Digbe's introduction when he had to introduce himself, a lot of emphasis on what doing corporate governance and all that. Should be interesting. I mean, beyond being a legal practitioner, known fact that is on quite a number of boards. And it is that sense that the question to Chief first will be that you should kindly share thoughts of guide to steering companies through the crisis beyond. I mean, especially in light of various challenges to having to bridge between operational ability and management and employment issues and all that we need to work. Chief, could hear your thoughts. How do you steer a company effectively through the crisis?
Thank you very much. Yes, as I said, I think I have the privilege of leading some of these companies, and the crisis, as I said, affected different companies in different ways. But for me, what we did was we looked at the company. We looked at the challenge which each of those companies are facing, and then we looked at the quality of management that the company has. So there were different decisions that were taken. For some, you had to change management immediately because there could be a manager who can manage an operating company, but may not have the skill to manage a company in crisis. So that's the first decision that you have to make sure that the manager is able to manage a company in crisis, and you watch. And then the next thing is to determine the level of engagement that you would have. So if the management is quite skilled, you can use what we refer to as light touch engagement. So essentially, they would run the operations, including managing the crisis, and the board would just be in the background. But if the management is weak, then you would find that there will be more engagement. So there were some of those companies where we were having meetings almost every week. And then later it moved to every 2 weeks. Then it moved to monthly. But there were some that the operations were so solid and strong that we didn't change the normal schedule of quarterly meetings. And they reported to us at the normal quarterly meetings what they are doing and how they are managing how they are responding to the crisis. And we were quite satisfied. There were times where, we could request for specific look at specific issues, by maybe the internal audit function or by the C-suite management, but most of the time we didn't really over engage. But for some other companies, we had to have stronger engagement. So from that governance point of view, you can't use a one cap fits all strategy. You look at the company, you look at their challenge, and then you engage based on some of these principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'm taking it from where you left. I think there is a follow-up question, and it's telling the truth that I'm actually provoked to ask Adeolu now, which is that what exactly can you tell us to do differently when the pandemic broke? What exactly
Thank you.
Differently?
Yes, so there are two things that we had to do differently, or at least do much more quickly than we might have planned. And that one, the first is to restructure for the future. And what do I mean by that? So that's looking at three areas. That's looking at the organization. Is the organization set up to deal with the realities, both current and going into what we would expect to happen post-COVID? Looking at the cost structure of the organization, because of course, has been mentioned in the past, this did have a significant cost impact on a number of sectors, a number of industries. And it would have been remiss of us if we didn't take a very keen look at our cost structure, just with the expectations of the economic impact over the coming year. And then the third was around strategies. So the strategies that we had in place before COVID, were they the right ones that would really take the company into the future post-COVID? So this is the restructuring for the future that we had to go through. Second piece was around digital work. And digital work, it talks about not just the tools, but also people and processes. So around people, looking at how we were working, where we were working, what makes sense going forward, with the assumption that COVID would be with us for some time to come. Looking at the possibilities that the current modern market in terms of digital tools can give us, and what changes do we need to make to our processes so that we could really leverage the way people are working and the tools they were using in the most effective manner. So again, twofold restructuring for the future and looking really at how to digitalize our work in the most effective way.
Okay. All right. Thank you for thoughts and letting us know. I mean, those that were maybe put in place and when the pandemic quite unexpected actually happened. Earlier on, I was talking about the protocol put where, I mean, the contingencies that they had to put in place as well. I mean, when the pandemic happened. And it's interesting that she mentioned something about virtual workspace. work on, which in effect is work life all about in so many. So, because up here, for quite some time, it will remain that because of uncertainty around how long this will for everything return to normalcy. So my question that would be that you could tell us where the protocols were put in place, specific protocols put in place, people to work. And then when I see this, I take, for example, the virtual digital workplace. We're talking about platforms and all of this, and all that. Question is, let's the protocol equally put it to example achieve work-life balance. And there were previous, you can imagine, was a start of employment with a lot of the employees. But then, I mean, the pandemic happened, and of course, something has to be done. And talking about platforms, I think quite safe sharing sensitive, confidential information, you know. Hello? Hello? So still, hello?
Falabi, your internet is a bit weak.
Oh, okay, sorry. Let me just take the, I was just trying to add element to another. Okay, fantastic. But can you hear me now?
It's a bit better.
Better? Is it better? Do I take the call again?
Yes, please.
Okay, I mean, this specifically is Tumbo, where about the contingent plans your company had put in place when the pandemic happened. And I'm now in that, okay, talking about those protocols, what really the protocols that are put in place to enable work home. And talking at the virtual workspace, I think those are secure for sharing sensitive company information and all that. Did you hear my question?
I didn't hear very well, but I think I heard bits of it. So I'm going to do my best to. I had a bit that had to do with people working from home and protocols, I think maybe around work-life balance. Did you say something to that effect?
Absolutely. I did.
And the second part of the question was, what was that about? Was that about around the ability to work remotely?
Security.
Using technology and how to safeguard that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's the question.
That's a question, yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I think in the beginning when the pandemic struck, we all thought it was really temporary, like I said. So I mean, there was nothing like work-life balance. We just all did the reaction time was very. I mean, we reacted very strongly. We were healthcare, and people were demanding for services, and people were panicking. So we threw ourselves into it, and we all thought we would work like mad for a very short time, and this would be over very soon. And very shortly, we realized it wasn't going to be over very soon, and that if care wasn't taken, people were going to burn out very quickly. So how did we start ensuring work-life balance? The first was to try as much as possible to just stop the sort of 24/7 work pattern that we had, more or less dived into when the pandemic broke. And to go back, take a step backwards and say, it's not really sustainable for us to work 24/7 the way we've been working. We just have to come back to a pattern of recognizing normal work hours, weekends, and night times. Let's just try and fit that in back and respect people's private times. That was the first thing we did. And also because we realized that, there's certain things you can do that also help to put this pattern in place. I will start sharing that with staff members as well. It's important to set aside a certain area in your home for work. So you need to have a certain table, a certain chair, a certain location where you sit. Please get appropriately dressed. Put on your video so we can see you. It's part of being appropriately dressed. So you enter a mental space for work, and you leave that space when work is over. So it's all part of trying to maintain that balance and, be in work when it's time to work and get out of work when it's time to finish working. So there were many other things which we started sharing amongst ourselves to just help us retain that break between work time and leisure time and family time, and so that we're all kind of balanced. It really doesn't mean that if there's a crisis and we need to call emergency meeting, stop doing that. It's just that it helped us to then get back to a pattern of understanding that there has to be a work life and there has to be time for leisure as well, and we need to put boundaries there and respect that for people. So that answers that question. For the second part of the question, to be quite frank, we set up a committee. First thing was we set up a committee in-house that included members of the IT team as well as our audit function. And then we had an external consultant as well work with us to make recommendations on how to strengthen our capabilities in that area. But not just to strengthen it in terms of security, but also to make it easier to collaborate without us necessarily being in the office. Because what we also realized was that, not being in the office meant that you couldn't just get up and walk and have meetings and sit down together over a cup of tea and have these discussions. And we didn't have enough of those kind of collaboration tools. Or maybe we had them, some of them we actually had them, but never used them as part of the suite of services that was available. I said, Adeolu nodding, so she had the same experience probably. We always had them, but we just never really optimized them until this time. So that's part of what we did. And then we had them, and it's still ongoing. I can't tell you that we finished, learning how to optimize all those tools that are there. It's a journey of bringing everybody along and teaching them that, look, this tool is there. Don't call me. Just call us together on this tool and let's brainstorm on this tool and let's come up with something. So it's recognizing what are the things that we now are using and how many of us are on board with using it the way it's supposed to be used, and setting milestones for us all. So that's how we've started. And
excellent, brilliant, excellent. Thank you for that intervention. I think one thing I cannot miss, I will readily take away is that clearly. You've suggested there that, the digital-led recovery has somehow helped to manage the uncertainty around what COVID-19 or the global public health crisis has actually imposed on lives and the world of work. So, I think the follow-up question I probably want to ask around that will be directed at Chief Idegbe. And the question will be that do you agree, sir, in the light of what Sumba has just explained now, that a digital-led recovery stirred by technology principally has actually has helped quite a number of businesses to go through the pandemic and still standing, managing to survive. And talking about that, are there lessons, takeaways? If you probably still within that breadth, also want to, if you agree that there are lessons, I would like to ask, sir, that, okay, if you are recruiting today, what skills, competencies would you be looking out for in new recruits? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think that the pandemic has accelerated the change that was already occurring, actually. For me, I have been basically operating globally for the last 9 years or so. I couldn't really say in the last 9 years where I am operating from. But there was a lot of resistance to it from clients, from colleagues, from other people, So what the pandemic did quite rapidly, I recall, we used to use Skype to have meetings and things like that, and people would say, hey, why is Chief not coming physically, and things like that. There was so much resistance. It just broke down within 2 months. all that resistance to technology. I remember once I was to have a meeting with a government department, and the client insisted that I must dial in by telephone, which is quite a normal way business is done abroad. When I dialed in, they spent the time complaining so much until, in fact, they were complaining so much they wanted to push me out of the meeting. But it turned out there was also one of them, one of their parties, that dialed in because that provision was made from Egypt. And that person spoke, and then they couldn't get me off the line. But today, within 2 months, it all went away. So there's in Africa, particularly where there was resistance to technology, what the pandemic has done is that it has made people more familiar with technology. But then if you look at Microsoft has the figures that shows that within 2 months, what they had planned for 2 years, they had to develop within 2 months. So that is not going to change again, the way business is done. And as Adiola said, that, every company is looking now at strategy in terms of the future, how services will be delivered. In our hospitality business, for instance, we are looking at remote entry. Nobody wants to touch a key, and things like that. And I don't think that is going to change. You have your key on your app. You open the door of the room from your app. You have no interfaces, So there are things that are changing permanently because of the pandemic. And it's only those who can anticipate this change and change the way they do business that will survive. In terms of recruitment, I remember in the 80s, there were two people who came looking for work when I was with R.I. Kuku & Co. as a partner. And then one had computer skill, the other didn't have. The two of them brilliant lawyers. And we took the one that had the computer skill because even at that time we were thinking that was an advantage. So I would say that who is the lawyer tomorrow? We are now talking about AI. We are talking about the lawyer tomorrow has to be somebody. I want to quote Richard Susskind. What he said is that the best way to survive is to create the future. In other words, if the future is going to be artificial intelligence, then the next lawyer is going to be the lawyer who is determining the algorithms that goes into that artificial intelligence. So it will be the lawyer who can write a program that will be using his legal knowledge to get a machine to take legal decision, right? So clearly there's a certain movement that is going on, that the skill set that you need. And if you go and look at let's take the IBM, a couple of years ago, about 2017, before the pandemic, did a research about the direction of legal services. And they found that there's a gap between the knowledge that lawyers have and the needs of the community. And so people struggle. For instance, over 12 years ago, I decided that gap existed and I wanted to fill it. And I decided that I was going to seek knowledge globally to fill a gap between the needs I am seeing of my clients coming from abroad and in Nigeria and the skills that I felt that I had or my firm had. And I felt that the only way was for us to be global. And this was all before the pandemic. And that hasn't changed anyway. I think what the pandemic has done is that it accelerated some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ifedipe. We're caught with time, very limited time before we round up, because this was actually we're meant to close this at 4, but with the kind mission, we'll probably be shooting till 4:10, so that we can then we'll come back to if there are questions and then the closing remarks by the chairman of the subcommittee. Now, so Chief, thank you so much. I mean, if I could just take a little thing from what you said, Richard Susskind, which you referred to, relating with the resistance that you said, maybe lawyers or maybe from Africa, we've always had with technology and all of that. It's interesting that Richard Susskind, in one of his books, had actually made reference to this. Susskind is, interestingly, is I started writing about AI as far back as 1980s. And I recall that in one of his books, he made reference to some incident that happened early 90s, and when Gary Kasparov, the world leading chess champion, was defeated by Deep Blue, which is just a computer and all of that. And he looked at it and he made some projection. He made some prediction. And one of which is sent to the Law Society of England and all that. Well, we should start looking at communicating with our client through email. And he said, one of those in the society got infuriated that, wait a minute, what are you talking? And you are taking away letters, sending emails and all of that, the public speeches. You made reference to that. Well, about a couple of years later, emails now became very common, lawyers sending updates and communicating with their clients. So the resistance has always been there, but I think pandemic has right now brought it on us that a lot of things we definitely need to migrate to. So let me come back to you with this last question, which will be that, and I would like you to please look at what will you do differently in the event of another pandemic? What will you do differently in the light of another pandemic? And closing also with what are the lessons for leaders and employees alike? Thank you.
Who is the question? Oh, myself. Okay. I want to, what will I?
Adeolu is taking the question. Yes.
Oh,
No, it's Adeolu.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chief, it's Adeolu. Okay, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. So what would we do differently in the event of another crisis? And this is always a difficult one because we say hindsight is 2020. Anticipate and grab those opportunities. And that's what I would say to myself, that there's lots of things that we could have done earlier, that we wanted to do earlier, that we planned to do earlier, that we had already started doing, particularly if you look at digitalizing our processes across the Allianz Group, but we just not fast enough. And so there will be other instances, there'll be other things that we're looking at. And rather than waiting, we just need to jump in and move. So I would say that moving away from talk and getting much more into action. Of course, considerate action, not going into rash decisions, but really just pushing for action. That would be my response there.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm reminded that when we can't take this further than we have, because this was actually, like I said earlier, we're actually meant to end this by 4 p.m. and this is 4:02. So apologies that we're not able to take the questions, but then we will find a way to address this. Get the panelists to address this and reach out to everybody who attended this. We thank you for being part of this. And at this point, let me call on Mr. Seokweku, the chairman of the NBA SBL Employment Law Relations Committee. Ose, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Folabi, for steering the conversation professionally. I'm very grateful for that. And must say a massive thank you to our panelists, Adesumbo, Leonard Silk, and Adeolu. I've learned quite a bit from today's session, and I'm sure a lot of people have learned quite a bit as well. Concept around anticipation, concept around digitalization, and doing things differently, and the fact that mental health has become something that's key that people talk about now. And somewhat we're grateful to the pandemic for like Dennis said, pushing the boundaries of how we do work. And whether we like it or not, the way we do work and how we do work, how we view work has changed forever. And so the skills that we need for today's work and tomorrow's work is very different from the skills that we needed for works of yesteryears. And so we're very grateful for the way the conversation has been steered and been managed and the issues have been thrown up. I would wish we had 2-3 hours to really drill this further down. Really, thinking about it, perhaps it was an error on our side. I thought we could deal with this conversation in an hour or so. But what I would say is that if we call on you again, please, we will, which we will definitely do. Please, we will need to take this conversation further, and we think we really need to take this conversation further. And so we will be reaching out to you again to do a part 2 of this CEO conversation, so we can truly have time to drill down the concept and the various ideas that have been thrown up here today. And so on that note, I'd like to say a very massive thank you to you all, and for our participants. We will try and send the questions you've asked to the relevant people, and then we can do us an email, and we'll send it out to you on email. But at this point, just before we go, there was a question here, and someone said to ask if you are recruiting, because she would love to work with you. So, so I just thought I should say that.
Yeah, look, talent is scarce, and I always say get the right people in. We'll find you something to do if you are the kind of talent we're looking for. When I find great people, I always find something for them to do. So please, you're welcome. I'll share my email.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you ever so much. And so on that note, I'd like to draw this to a close and then get Onyinye to take on for the next segment. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Okpeku. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. That was very eye-opening for us upcoming CEOs. Thank you very much. I would go quickly into introducing the next panel because we are running quickly out of time, and I have tried to cut their profiles as short as I can. I hope I do justice to these introductions. Okay, so first, in the next panel, we'll be hearing from the employees and their perspective on, being an employee in a time of uncertainty and turmoil. And I would introduce the panelists first and then the moderators afterwards. First off, we have Shola Odunsi, who is an associate at Templars. Shola is a key associate at Templars Dispute Resolution Practice and Task Group. She's a double first-class holder from Acaba University at Ado-Ekiti and the Nigerian Law School. She graduated top of her class from the Acaba University, winning several awards and prizes, including Best Student from the College of Law. At the Nigerian Law School, she was one of the recipients of the DG Prize for the first-class students. She was also one of 4 pioneer first-class students from the Yola campus of the Nigerian Law School. Shola is also the Secretary General of the Acaba University Alumni Association and a mentor with Hands and Bridges, a boutique mentorship program for students of the Nigerian Law School. Welcome so much, Shola. Next up, we have Deborah Patrick Acaba, who is an associate at Goldsmith Solicitors LP. Deborah is an astute transactional lawyer with experience in a wide range of corporate activities. Her corporate and business advisory, as well as employment practices, focus majorly on cross-border transactions, startups, contractual review, corporate governance structure, restructuring, regulatory compliance, contract termination, and redundancy. She has acted as chairperson for an employment tribunal in an international wine manufacturing company. She has also advised multinational oil and gas clients on restructuring their organizations and the effect of downsizing on employees of the organizations. She's a member of the Association of Young Arbitrators and the NBA SBL ELIR. She is also a volunteer mentor at Vibrant Girls Development Initiative. Welcome, Deborah. Next up, we have Folajimi Akinla, who is the senior lead for the Tax Controversy and Dispute Resolution, PwC Nigeria. He has over 10 years cognate experience supporting clients in litigation and alternative dispute resolution. He also provides private client services to HNWIs. Before joining PwC, Folajimi worked in a law firm renowned for its litigation and dispute resolution practices and has appeared before all superior courts of record in Nigeria. He is a qualified tax practitioner and obtained the Advanced Diploma in International Tax issued by the Chartered Institute of Taxation UK, which allows him to practice tax internationally. He holds a master's degree from Queen Mary University of London and is a graduate of the University of Lagos. Welcome, Folajimi.
Thank you, Onye. It's my pleasure to be here.
And so I will introduce our two moderators for this panel. First, I will introduce Deborah Chukwedo, FCIR UK. Deborah is a Nigerian lawyer and arbitrator with 18 years post-call experience in corporate and commercial law practice. She has represented a wide range of clients in structuring transactions, including investments and divestments, mergers and acquisitions, real estate and construction. She is also a dispute resolution specialist, representing and advocating for clients in litigation, mediation, and arbitration. She is currently a partner at Ascendo Law, where she heads the capital market and real estate department of the law firm and leads its ADR practice. She's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Nigeria branch. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Onyinye. Glad to be here.
And finally, we have Akinwumi Ajiboye, who is the practice head of the Employment and Industrial Relations Group at Kunuka Attorneys and Solicitors. He is a pragmatic and results-driven lawyer who continuously seeks to improve the status quo by preferring bespoke and creative solutions to legal issues of varying complexities across several practice areas. He has distinctively represented and provided legal advisory to local and foreign companies across a wide range of industries on topical, complex, and sensitive matters. His specialty includes employment and labor law, insolvency and business restructuring, tax, and dispute resolution. Welcome, Akinwumi.
So much, Onye.
Okay, so I would hand over to Deborah, who would begin the conversation with the panelists in this session. I look forward to hearing it. Thank you. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Onyinye. Hello, everyone. Thank you to our panelists and to our audience who have stood by us for the past 1 hour. So I'll just go straight into it so that we don't take up more time, so we don't lose time. So I'll start with you, Deborah, my namesake, not because you're my namesake. So we've just had the CEO speak about how they scrambled to work out modalities for working from home when the government ordered the lockdown and the restriction of the movement. So how was that experience from your perspective and your fellow employees? How was that from your perspective?
Right, thank you, Deborah. So, when the pandemic happened, it just, it happened and it hit all of us. A lot of us were not, aware that this was going to happen, and it gave rise to a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety. And a lot of us were looking up to our employers, to wear different hats, to be, a support system, to be a friend, and to also be a leader at that time. So what my experience with my firm here at Goldsmith was that I found that my employers were willing and ready to support us, and they were, willing and ready to assist us, encourage us. They were giving us, there was an effective communication system in place before, this happened. So it was easy to transition. It was easy to, get the support that we needed to, come out from this and, hit the ground running. So in as much as a lot of us would have faced a lot of challenges because we were not aware that the pandemic was coming over, but they had the support system from our employers because we had this communication system. There was a breach of communication gap, and we're able to discuss with our employees on, the information that we needed. And information that was shared to us on, health system, healthcare, how to take about safety measures to make sure that it was safe and to make sure that we were home and working fine, and the right tools were provided for us to work with. So I would say that my experience was it was an interesting one for me, even though at sometimes at a little bit of points it was uncertain, but it was interesting because it was easy for me to transition into this, and I didn't really face so much of a problem here at Goldsmith. So yeah, that was my experience going into this pandemic. Thank you.
So basically the ease of communication and the approachability of your employers made it easier.
Yes, it did. Yes, it made it easier. Thank you. Yes, it did.
Interesting. Okay, so Folajimi, I'll be going over to you now. So do you think that there were already work processes and structures that predated the pandemic that helped you work seamlessly? And what kind of structures were there?
Yeah, thanks, Deborah, for that question. Interestingly, the kind of work we do in PwC, you would require specific tools to help you succeed. So when you join PwC, you are equipped with a laptop, an internet dongle, a phone line if you're a manager, senior manager and above. So these were typical tools of trade for us at PwC. And of course, when you're given these gadgets, there's also the IT support. Again, given that we handle a lot of sensitive information for clients, there are the appropriate firewalls in place. There are also both hardware and software security tools on the laptop. So when the pandemic really hit, there was not so much of a shock, right, with continuing working the way we were used to working already. If you consider how we work, in a lot of instances, we work at client site, which is some sort of remote working. So there wasn't really much of the shock as far continuing the way you work. It's also interesting to note that as far back as 2015, we had already begun experimenting some sort of remote working style where managers at above were allowed, well, at least in the tax department, were allowed to work from home once a week. That rule was modified to, okay, work from home if you're a manager when you had to. The rule was further modified to include all staff in the tax unit. So we had instances where people would genuinely work from home. So the pandemic hit hard, but then we sort of had that experience. So it was smooth for us. So the uncertainty I faced personally was not so much of that. The uncertainty for me personally was clocking the hours. A large part of my job includes representing taxpayers at the tribunal, or the tax appeal tribunal. So when tribunal was shut down indefinitely, then I found I had all this time in my hands and there was really not much work to do. So I had to look for work for myself. I had to create work and I had to think outside the box. And that was the core uncertainty for me with respect to, what do I do with all this time where I can't go to court? But that was resolved somewhat. So I guess for me, there was a glitch with respect to how we work normally. The uncertainty for me was redundancy, but that was quickly addressed. Thank you. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. You did. Apparently, you guys were pandemic ready, and you didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't know. Honestly, it was the only problems we had were people's laptops started crashing because people didn't shut down their laptops at home. Yeah. So you had, I'm sure you probably discussed it along the line where people keep their laptops on indefinitely. You know, when you work in the office and you close, you shut down, put the laptop in your bag, and go home. But then you had instances where people had their laptops on, and it created another set of unique challenges. But I guess we can touch on that as we proceed in the discourse.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Olushola, I know you work in a law firm. Law firms don't usually have closing hours. So we just heard Ms. Adesimbo speak about how they had to physically put things in place to help them mentally prepare for work. What kind of structures did you put in place and how did you cope with working from home and then still trying to meet the hours of the law firm?
Yes, and thank you. And it's actually great being here. As you said, yeah, working at a law firm will usually require like long hours, sometimes even when you plan not to. What kind of structures did we put in place to manage, work and having a balance? One, I would say, is identifying it. So, you're going home, you get to work from home. It's very comfortable waking up and realizing that, there's something you had to do. And first thing, you just start working on it. The next thing, you jump onto the next thing, maybe till you're hungry. And then you just go to find something quick to eat. So I think one was recognizing that, we seem to be losing. In fact, this is worse than the office because at the office, that is when you come in, you get coffee or get your tea, settle in, you work, go for lunch. But in fact, you could lose even that little break working from home. So I would say one thing was recognizing that there was that challenge and then putting things in place like deciding that, oh, I usually have breakfast in the morning, I would be having breakfast in the morning before I set out to work. I would love to close out maybe at this time. For myself, I like to work at night. So there was a thing of, oh, this is even a great opportunity to work at night. So maybe close out in the earlier in the evening and then work maybe through the night and get enough sleep. So I would say that one thing was recognizing it, because I would say some of us didn't even recognize it on time. Like myself, I don't think I recognized it on time. It was later on I realized, oh, I'm beginning to lose, a lot of time. So one, recognizing the problem, and then putting in times, like checking in times. I wouldn't say I was able to have, how usually advised to have a place of work. I wouldn't say that worked for me because I didn't really like to work, one place. So, but I would say recognizing it and then intentionally working around it was very helpful.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to hand over to my able co-moderator, Acaba, now to take up from here. Acaba, over to you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you so much. Insightful comments by Folajimi, Olusola, and Deborah. Before I proceed to the next set of questions, I don't know if the poll questions are ready. We want to conduct a poll. We have 3 poll questions, and I believe is being displayed on our screen at the moment. And we have about a minute to answer the poll questions. The first one is, what was your biggest downside of work during the pandemic? Pay cuts, overtime, lack of social interaction, or no work? That's the first question. The second question is, one of the positives that can be taken from the pandemic is the avalanche of free, discounted online virtual trainings and courses. Were you able to take advantage of this in acquiring new skills? Yes or no? You can start voting. The last question is, if given a path to choose, would you rather continue work from home or resume physically at the office? Yes, not at all, no. Or the last option is alternate between 1 and 2, that is alternate between resume at the office and working from home. We can start voting. We'll shut the poll within a minute. Thank you so much. We have 13 more seconds to vote if we haven't voted yet. Okay, thank you so much. I think we can close the poll now, so we can actually go through the result of the poll. So we have the result. What was the biggest downside of work during the pandemic? The first one was pay cuts, that's 9%. The next one was overtime, that's 40%. And the highest was lack of social interaction, that's about 42%. And the least is no work at 9%. Then the next question is, one of the positives that can be taken from the pandemic is the avalanche of free, discounted online virtual trainings and courses. Were you able to take advantage of this in acquiring new skills? 91% voted yes, while 9% said no. If given a path to choose, would you rather continue work from home or resume physically at the office? 16% said yes, while 9% said no, while a massive 6% said they would alternate between working from home and resuming at the office. So judging from this poll now, I would be directing my next question to Folajimi. Folajimi, about 40% of attendees said one of the biggest downside of work during the pandemic was the issue of working overtime, where the normal work hour between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. wasn't a thing. People were required to work at odd hours with no payment of overtime allowance or fees. So what's your take on that? And do you think do you think Nigerian employees can take a leave from friends to students where they have the right to disconnect? Right? Because working overtime has an effect on mental health. So what would you say in this regards?
Yeah, thanks, Akiomi. I think the first thing to note is both employer and employee need to first recognize the risk of overtime and the effects that it can do to employees, and in the long run, employers themselves. I heard an unfortunate story of a young man who was working, and his colleagues just found out that they couldn't reach him first day, second day, and they visited his home, and he was found dead right in front of his computer. Unfortunate story. But those are some of the effects of sitting down for so long, especially when we work in an environment that is not the typical office environment. You likely have things like back pain, neck pain, because your chair and the table you use is improvised. So it's a problem both employer and employee need to recognize. They both have different responsibilities. For example, I strongly believe in your health should come first as an individual. So we need, as employees, you need that self-discipline to have forced breaks. What do I mean by forced breaks? So you after sitting down for a while, stand up, get up, take a walk around, stretch, do some stretch, and come back. So that can take a 5-minute exercise just to get yourself circulating. You know, if you sit down for too long, there's also the risk of blood clots and thrombosis for those who are familiar with medical terms. So you need to stretch and move around. Forced break should also force you to eat, get beverage, a drink, etc. Now, employers still have a role, and the role is to sort of have reminders for their staff on the things to do. Now, when we discovered that the pandemic was going to have a protracted effect, what PwC did was have or organize health talks with staff. So you have virtual sessions where you have a professional come in and speak to us about the implications or health implications of sitting down too long, of working overtime. So it was something that was brought to our consciousness that, okay, you need to take a break. Now, there are specific individuals, who would drive you to work harder to deliver. And there are others who sort of appreciate the fact that, okay, people need to take a break. So I think there needs to be a balance on both sides of an employer, where employer exhibits empathy, and the parts on the employee where they can also sort of take personal responsibility for themselves and their health. So it's interesting, you mentioned France, so there's that right to disconnect. But I think that right is actually statutory, where employees are allowed to just shut down and just go. So if it's good, we can adopt that, but then it needs to go into the rule books, the statutes, and possibly employment contracts. So I think it's something we can then take a lead from to prevent situations where people suffer in their health because of forced hours or prolonged sitting in uncomfortable positions. Thank you. So yes, I believe we can sort of find a way of adopting similar for our climate. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Folajimi. I'll be coming back to you, Deborah, flowing from Folajimi's response about the fact that the right to disconnect in France is actually a statutory right, and we don't have that available in our labor law, in the Labor Act of 1971, which is quite antiquated and outdated, basically. So, do you think the labor laws we have in Nigeria, adequately protect the welfare interest of employees in Nigeria? And if you don't think so, what do you think can be done about it?
Okay, thank you so much. So just flowing from what Folajimi said, saying the fact that, in France, I think it was in 2016, when they implemented that law for employees having the right to disconnect. And we all know that the law governing, employment and labor relations in Nigeria is the Labor Act, and it doesn't, explicitly cover everything the employees would need in a working environment. It basically covers the lower cadre of workers. So the higher people or the people who are not covered by the labor employment law are now are governed by the contract of employment. And like your questioner said, what laws do we need to put in place if our laws here, doesn't cover exactly what is needed for the employees? My recommendation would be that we have to borrow a leaf from international practices from other jurisdictions. So if we look at other jurisdictions, we see how they've evolved over time based on practices. And if I was to recommend, I would say that what we need to do is borrow a leaf from other jurisdictions and then try as much as possible to also implement this strategy in our law as well as in our contract. I believe that employees have the right to disconnect from work when they're working overtime, just like Folajimi has said. And it's also identifying and recognizing that we're working overtime, because most times Nigerians, we tend to push ourselves more than we can chew, and we try to bite off more than we can chew in a bid to please our employer. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying try to balance it with work and and family as well. So in as much as our contract of employment to say we work from 8 to 6 or so, we find out that most people tend to work overtime, tend to work till 10 p.m., 11 p.m. and the sort. And if we're able to curtail that and also have a discussion around that with our employers, and if we are able to stick to the contract of employment and also have a room for payment of overtime, I think that this will address the issues around working overtime and working overtime without being paid. And as Falajimi said, somebody had to die. Somebody died in front of execs, and I think that's really sad. So my recommendation again, like I would say, is borrow a leaf from the international jurisdictions and try and change the laws as it is. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Quite interesting. The NIC, the Court Seats of Jurisdiction over Labor Matters, is actually vested with the power to actually apply international best practices and apply international treaties and conventions even without Nigeria domesticating same. So I think that window has been to a certain extent opened. So I'll be moving on to Olusola Duse. Hi, Olusola. Flowing from the poll that was conducted, a large number of attendees, and even from research and report, still want to work from home. Like the work from home, the remote work policy or arrangement was quite successful, I think. And so, but the contrary is, right now our businesses reopening and mandating the employees to return back to physically. What do you think is the cause of this, since the work from home arrangement was quite successful? Do you think there's a mistrust in the system between the employees and the employers? Do you think employers think the employees cannot work effectively without fiscal supervision or working from the office? What do you think? Please, can you do on that, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are a number of factors that are causing this, and one of them I would say would be that issue of mistrust. And it's not just in this climate, like globally, a lot of managers felt like working remotely made it harder for them to manage their associates or people they are meant to manage. So yes, I think mistrust is one of the factors that employers may have at the back of their minds in asking employees to resume work, which is quite interesting, because from the poll we see that one of the issues with working from home is overtime, working overtime. So it then begs the question, why should there be a mistrust when people seem to even be working overtime at home? I think people prefer working from home majorly because of the comfort. Like, you're working from home, you don't go through traffic. So I think that's why, even with that discomfort of working overtime, people are happy to work from home than come to the office. So yes, I think that there's a bit of mistrust. I think that there are other factors also. So and just pulling back to the issue of mistrust, I would say that speaking to an employer, I would say one thing to do is to say the why behind, why are we resuming back at the office? Because we can't deny that the year 2020 opened our eyes to things that a number of us had never experienced. You work from home for months. Some persons work from home years and for over a year. Some persons are still working from home. So if you're going to say, we are resuming back, which is like going back to the old normal, if we would say, if we're going back to normal, I think that there should be a conversation between the employer and the employee, expressing what the mind of the employer is. And it's funny because even in cases where the employers take decision for the benefit of the employees, there are a number of cases where like reports that have or studies, the employees still feel like, it wasn't for my good. Maybe it's some reason that the employer chose that we should resume, or whatever the decision is. So I would say that there should be conversations between the employer and the employee. For instance, at Templars, when discussions about reopening were had, it was not a discussion of one meeting. It was a discussion of meetings. Why should we resume? How should we resume? Do we want to resume 5 times a week, which nobody likes, or how many days a week. And then you're able to strike a balance between the employer and the employee. And I would not, you see that one of the things people said was, oh, lack of social interaction. So even on the side of the employee, they miss that interaction. So it's not like they don't want to go to work. I think they just want to have that balance of, okay, maybe I should have the choice to work from home some days in the week or something. So I think having that conversation would take away that case of mistrust from the side of the employer.
Thank you so much, Olushola. Flagimi, I would love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Akiomi. And interestingly, I know that Germany is considering a legislation where employees would be able to state how often they would like to work remotely. So I mean, if and again, the poll is clear, the statistics are clear. People prefer the hybrid system where they have a choice to work from home when they need to, because there are genuine reasons why some people work from home. Really, let's call a spade a spade. And there are also valid reasons why people need to come to the office when necessary. So people just want that freedom to say, okay, I want the power to choose where I want to work and how I want to work. Of course, without sacrificing without your work quality suffering. Interestingly, PwC, we have different flexible arrangements. So an employee can decide to say, okay, I don't want to work 5 days a week. I want to work 4 days a week, 3 days a week. And those are extremes, but I mean, the essence behind it is the employee has a choice. You can opt out of the 5 day a week contract, reduced hours, of course, reduced pay. But again, people are happier with the fact that you're giving them that power to make that choice.
Okay, thank you so much, Vladimir. It seems the future of work is an hybrid solution whereby people can actually choose between working at the office or working from home. But I would love to ask Deborah this question. Deborah, like offices are reopening, and surprisingly, one of the measures being adopted by employers of labor is to ensure that the workplace is safe for resumption. And in some places, employers of labor are actually mandating the employees to get vaccinated before resuming at the office. What's your thought on this? Do you think employers can mandatorily require the employees to get vaccinated before resuming at work?
Okay, thank you, Akiomi, for that question. So first of all, the labor law has already said that, employers of labor should make sure that their office and their work environment is safe, and, they put in health protocols for all their employees. Now, with all that being said, now I don't think that it is it's mandatory. I don't think that it is right for employers to mandate their employees to get the vaccine. While I understand the need for safety protocol and health measures being put in place, and I understand that employers may, want to say, oh, I don't want anyone to contact the virus. I don't want anyone to have the virus when they come to work. So in as much as we're going to transition back to work, I want everyone to get the vaccine. It's not something that you mandate to employees to do. It's something that you try to encourage them to do. A bit of education would need to come in, because you need to educate these employees on why they need to have, the vaccine, why they need to take it. So mandating them and saying, if you don't take this, you can't come to work, or if you don't, I don't think that that is something that an employer should do if you are putting in, the welfare and the best interest of the employee at heart. So with that being said, my answer to that would be, mandating your employees to take the vaccine is not something that you should be doing. What you should be doing should be educating your employees, train them on the need to have this, vaccine taken, and why this can help them to reduce, spreading of the virus or that, because everyone is trying to be, safe and trying to take in the measures that they need to do. So you don't necessarily need to mandatorily prescribe, but you need to embrace them and also educate them and also tell them why they need to do that. So that would be my answer to that. And then here I go, Smith, that has also been an issue of discussion where we've had to discuss if you want to take the vaccine. And it's not a compulsory thing here at my office. Some people here have taken the virus, and some people here are well advanced to not taking the virus because they don't understand. There's a trust issue, and also that virus on that vaccine itself. We are not even sure, and there's so many uncertainties about the vaccine. We're not sure if I take it, if it's going to stop me from spreading the virus or getting the virus. So why would you force me to take something that you're not even sure about? You're not sure of it. So, that's, with that being said, I don't think you should mandate your employees to take the vaccine. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Deborah, for the insight. But Olusegun, I want to ask you a direct question, and it's kind of really personal. What if Templars where you work mandatorily require you to get vaccinated before you return back to the office? What would be your reaction in circumstance?
Firstly, God, Templars doesn't require that of me. If Templars required me to take the vaccine, I think first would be having a conversation with management, understanding why it is compulsory for me to take the vaccine. So for instance, if I understand, the reason we want you to take the vaccine is because we're looking at the safety of everyone, what can I do? Can I wear my mask all through while I'm at the office? If you want to even keep me in a different office than my colleagues who have, if they will feel more comfortable, would you prefer that? And that's the funny thing, because, you're looking at those that have been vaccinated as against those that have not been vaccinated. When there's the discussion between both groups, you even see that those that have been vaccinated don't want to be, kept aside from those that have not been. So I think I will have a discussion with management and then also look at my stand. Do I want to take it? Do I not want to take it? But I think understanding why they will be taking such a position will be one thing I will want to get. And then from there, look at it. What can I do? Is there something I can propose in place of me taking the vaccine? And yeah, just from there, find a way. I think that's
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll be moving over to Falajimi now. Falajimi, one of the downside of working remotely when the lockdown was prevalent was the issue of depression and mental exhaustion of employees. And like you said, a particular employee slumped and had nobody to attend to him or her, basically. So do you think employers did enough? Do you think employers somewhat contributed to the increase in mental exhaustion and depression that was suffered by many employees during the lockdown and in the course of the pandemic? And what do you think can be done about it?
Yeah, thanks, Akil. Just to clarify the story I said, the unfortunate incident did not happen at PwC. It was some other Nigerian company. Yes, I just thought to clarify that so they won't say PwC staff died. No, it did not happen here. So to answer your question, did employers contribute to it, or what could they have done better? I think education would be a big deal in addressing some of these things, and I'll bring it down to home. So what we did in PwC to prevent some of these things was, when the pandemic started, the partners asked us to carry out a survey similar to what you put up. So the survey contained a number of questions. What are your biggest fears? Is it pay cut? Is it the fact that you've been let off? What's your biggest stress factor? How's it working from home, family life? So at the end of that exercise, right, the partners had data as to what were the genuine concerns of people. What I helped them do was address those problems, right? So you had a situation where we had provided information, haven't taken a survey on what were our pain points. And from that survey, things were put in place. For example, I mentioned that we had periodic talks from health experts. We also made up our mind to carry on like there was no pandemic. So everything that we would have done before, e.g. weekly trainings, even our away day celebration, we had everything online. So we had instances where people would be required to even have like a social gathering online. So you get your team members, grab a drink after work, video, then sort of just gist through. So we found out that system sort of helped people to distress. There were also clubs that were set up. So we had reading club, cycling club. So we just tried to group, because the reality was there are some people who were staying alone and they didn't have the comfort of interaction or a family buffer or an emotional buffer to help them. So we sort of created small groups of people with like-minded interests to come together weekly or as they felt was okay for them to sort of exchange ideas. So yes, an employer can play a big role in sort of managing the stress life in the office. I've been told employees, when you're tired, shut down and go. And we've addressed some of those points where you get carried away with work. You think, oh, because I'm at home, I can work 24 hours. You know, so there was your team lead will tell you, okay, shut down at a particular time. So we even discussed things like your laptop giving you prompts to shut down after a period of time. So yes, the employer has a big role to play, and some employers play that role in a fantastic way. And I'm happy to say my employer did that, but there are also, of course, unfortunate stories that we heard. So employers do play a big role. Employees also, I believe, have a personal responsibility to themselves to keep themselves hale and hearty.
Thank you so much, Folajimi, for the deep insight on that. I'll be going over to Deborah, and this is my last question, basically. Talking about the future of work, which is not in the nearest future, the future of work is actually now. So what do you think are the necessary skills that you think employees should be armed with in order to stay relevant in their industry, basically?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Akinomi. So, like you said, the future of work is now, the future of work is here. And what are the necessary skills that employees need to have? The first skill that I would say that employees need to have is adequate communication skill. You know, the ability to communicate effectively your need to your colleagues, to your employers, and to even your clients as well. If you're not able to effectively communicate clearly your needs and your intentions or your instructions, then people may tend to misunderstand what you're trying to pass across. So the first thing that I would say everybody needs to have is an effective communication skill. The second thing that I think that every employee should have, pushing forward towards the future is, upskilling yourself, getting a lot of digital skills, getting a lot of digital training, soft skills. There are a lot of, things online that you can learn, a lot of things in Coursera, a lot of free web educational places where you can actually train yourself and upskill your talents and get a lot of information. And then, the future is going towards a lot of technology. So I think that employees should also try and imbibe the culture of understanding simple technological things that they need to do, simple digital things that they need to do on the computer, simple things that they need to do on cloud system, cloud computing, just things like that. Just having a contingency plan, and also continuous self-development of yourself, getting mentorship, getting training, and then continually developing yourself to be able to, stand out from among your peers, because people are not just looking for people who now know what is in the books. People are looking for people that have the soft skills, that can put to play when they need them to come to work, when they need them to do things in the office, so those kind of soft skills, just generally, are the kinds of things that I think that everybody needs to have. And then the ability to be adaptive, or how will I say, have the flexibility to adapt to a certain situation whenever it comes. So adaptability skills as well, and then also being flexible to things that may come. Now people are talking about working hybrid, both remotely and coming to work physically. So if you're not able to adapt to something like that, and you're saying you're going stuck on hard bent on one thing, it may not really work for you in the future, because you need to balance it out. With the millennials that we're having, and baby boomers and Gen Z, we need to balance everybody in together and have that thing, step scaling together. So I just think that is what every employee should try to imbibe. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Deborah. Olusola, in these uncertain times, how strongly would you recommend mentorship for employees in order for them to get proper guidance or not to navigate these uncertain times? How strongly would you recommend mentorship?
Thank you. I don't think I would put mentorship now different from I would have like before the pandemic. I wouldn't, because what the pandemic has done is how we work, not necessarily the work. And I think mentorship is more substantive than, you get what I mean? So I think mentorship is important, and to each his own. Like different people, for some persons, direct mentorship doesn't work from them. Like they read books, they will follow you, like read your books and all that, and they might not have that personal mentorship. So first thing I would say is know yourself. Like, what do you want? Do you want to have a personal relationship with someone who is, you have maybe some persons have very structured mentorship where they have once a week or twice in a month, and they speak to someone about, oh, my career, this is what I'm doing. So I think first thing is, what do you want? Like, by yourself, do you think you want somebody? Certain persons, once they have a mentor, they will never reach out again. You just realize, oh, I'm not cut out for this. So first, know yourself. Do I want a mentor in that strict form, or do I just want to read books of persons and just get inspired and see how are they thinking, how am I thinking, kind of thing? And if you realize that, oh, you want to have persons in your direct structured mentorship, I would say be very strategic about it. I don't think the way of just hitting up somebody, or I just want to read up, like yourself, what do you want, what questions do you have, and you can reach out to them on various platforms. The way the world is going, thankfully, before, I'm sure if you wanted to have a mentor, you will go to his or her office, reach out. Now there is social media. Almost everybody that wants to remain relevant is at least on LinkedIn, if they are very serious, on LinkedIn at least, and then you have other social media handles. Reach out to them, and just ask the questions. You have questions you want them to answer. I feel like that really helps in getting the talk going. Have questions that you want to ask and all of that. So in sum, know what you want. Do you want a structured mentorship? If you want it, go for it strategically.
Thank you so much, Luciana. At this juncture, I'll be handing over to my co-host or moderator in person of Deborah. Over to you, Deborah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akiwumi, and thank you to the panelists for sharing so much information. I mean, obviously, we now know that apart from the infrastructural changes, employers also need to support their employees emotionally, and I mean, communication is key, and of course, employees also have their role to play. So we have just one question. We're almost out of time. So I will just throw the question open to the panel. Anyone can answer so that Akiwumi can give the vote of thanks and we can close. So the question says, will you say remote work affected new employees who happen to have gotten the job during the pandemic? And also, how can employers handle new employees in the era of remote work so that they feel like part of the team? I don't know if anybody wants to take that.
If I can just say something on that. I think it affected them greatly. I didn't join any team during the pandemic, but I have colleagues who joined the Templars team during the pandemic, and you will see that they had to be conscious efforts from the firm to have them integrate with the team. So when you join Templars, say 1-2 months, you already have people cracking jokes with you and teasing you and all of that. But we were working remotely. So first is that the people you would even be speaking to would only be persons that you were directly working with. So, I am a team member with Shola, so I would interact with Shola. So I think it affected them. I don't think there's a doubt about that. But I think that employers and even the employees also took different initiatives to ensure that they got the full value. So even as an employer, you don't just want to have a team member who is not interacting with the rest of your team. You want to, have that integration. So there were different things that different teams did. Some teams had games on Friday, so they would just come on board and play games. And some people are winning dollars from it. So even if you're a new member, you want to win more. So, you would play and, catch up with the rest of the team. So I think that there is that issue. But as everything else, whatever challenge we have like that, which is a challenge, I think both the employer, and the employee should look at how can we make the most of this situation that we find ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Olushola. Okay, so thank you to all of our panelists for sharing so much insightful information. I myself, I picked a lot from it. I think I should communicate more with my colleagues. So thank you so much, and I hope that we can all move. Our audience was able to take a lot of pointers for how we can all work effectively, taking care of our mental health as well, and communicating when need be. Always reach out to somebody, and when someone reaches out to you, please be patient. So thank you to everyone. Onine, can I hand over to you now?
Yes, that works perfectly. Thank you. Thank you so much. So today's conversation, as Deborah had just said, really shed light on the nature of work relations post-pandemic, and I've really learned a lot. One of the things that came across to me in the CEO segment is that we need to, as businesses, anticipate. And I think that that is key in our approach to business, regardless of what sector or industry that we're in. Because when we anticipate, then we're better able to plan for the changes that come, even though we don't know all of them. And we will be less resistant to things like using technology to run our businesses, also hold meetings, which is in a way what Folajimi mentioned, had PwC more prepared during the pandemic. And I also think, and also in terms of, and also balancing that with concern for employees' well-being and adequate compensation, of course, to handle all the shifts that have happened in the workplace after the pandemic occurred. And then from the employee segment, one of the things that came across strongly to me is that having an open door policy in your company where employees can simply come in and have a conversation about what makes work feasible for them will actually affect the structure of work in the future. It's less likely going to be we handed down the policies of how the firms work or how the organization works. Each employee really, really would want to have a say more than ever before in how their work life is defined. Going from that, I would like to thank all the speakers for their time and the rousing conversations that we've had in today's panels. I would especially like to thank Mr. Jemide, the chairman of the MBA SBL, for his opening remarks. I would also like to thank the attendees for their active participation and their time. And as Mr. Bekel has said, we will do our best to respond to any unanswered questions later on. Thank you all again. We look forward to seeing you at the next Legal Business Digital Conversations.
Thank you very much. Pleasure is ours, and we look forward to your subsequent invites. God bless.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really nice to be here. Really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.